Let's talk about something that most people never get right. The difference between El and Yahuah. In Deuteronomy 32, it says, "When Elion, the Most High, divided the nations, he gave them their inheritance. But Israel was Yahuah's portion." So read that carefully. Elion, the Most High, he divides the nations. But Israel belongs to Yahuah. That means El and Yahuah are not interchangeable names. El is the generic title, the universal Most High, but Yahuah is the covenant name. So here's the distinction. El is like saying God. It's a category. It can apply to anyone's conception of the divine. That's why Canaanite texts call their chief deity El. And that's why pagan nations could still use the word. But Yahuah, that's different. That's the revealed name of the covenant. That's not generic, that's specific. So think about Genesis. It says Yahuah Elohim formed the Adam. But before that, it talks about Adam, mankind, in the generic sense. Adam versus the Adam. It's the same pattern. Generic versus covenant. Humanity in general versus the covenant man. El in general versus Yahuah in covenant. And here's the punchline. Nations may know El, philosophers may talk about God, mystics may sense a Most High, but only Israel, only the covenant people know Yahuah. Because the pulse doesn't belong to the generic. The pulse belongs to the name. That's why his name equals 26 in Hebrew gematria. That's why it's encoded in the slope and the chambers of the Great Pyramid. That's why it shows up in Torah's hidden letter sequences. Because covenant is not about vague belief in a God. It's about Yahuah binding himself to his people by name. So when you hear people say, well, all gods are the same, or we all worship the same God, just different names, you know the deception. El may be generic, but Yahuah is covenant. And the prophetic pulse is not carried by the generic. It's carried by the name. That's why the nations can rage and still claim belief in God, but only those sealed by the name walk in covenant. And that's why the enemy always tries to erase the name, because without the name, the pulse looks random. But with the name, the pulse reveals the plan. So here's the dividing line. El divides the nations. Yahuah claims his remnant. The pulse doesn't belong to the crowd. It belongs to the covenant. And this distinction, El versus Yahuah, is the same pattern you saw with Adam versus the Adam. Covenant versus generic. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Now, let's push it further. Because if Isaiah saw a pillar and an altar in Egypt as a witness to Yahuah, not El, and if Enoch saw a tower of great stones built for Yahuah, not El, then you start realizing even the structures of stone were covenant scrolls, and modern science is only now catching up to what prophecy encoded thousands of years ago. So like and follow for more. You don't want to miss what's next.